Do you remember that feeling when Avengers Endgame came out? Where people were waiting months, sometimes even years, for the conclusion of a significant chapter within the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Well, that's happening for 21 Pilots fans right now. If you don't know, or if you're not a fan of the band, they've been developing a storyline throughout their entire discography, and they started this storyline over 10 years ago. For a long time, the story that was being depicted was subtle, and fans had to piece together bits of lore through lyrics and their music videos. But then the band decided to lean more into this story right before the release of their most critically acclaimed album, Trench. Leading up to this album, the band started posting mysterious websites and articles depicting writings and journal entries from a character we hadn't met yet named Clancy. These letters led as a gateway to more fully understand the album Trench when it came out. And to this date, Trench is still the closest thing they've ever made to a concept album. The lore and the story came to the forefront of the listener's attention rather than sitting in the background. If you didn't read the letters or look too deeply into the lyrics, you could still really enjoy the album because the music was just that great. But if you did want to learn more about this world that 21 Pilots was creating, you got something entirely different from the experience. And I'm not going to walk you through the entire story up until this point. There's hundreds of YouTubers that have already done this, and they know much more about the subject than I do. In fact, 21 Pilots actually created a video recapping all of the lore up until this point and released it on their YouTube channel, ahead of the first single that released for their new album, Clancy. That's right, the character who wrote and released those mysterious letters before Trench is back and is the main focal point of this album. And to take everything a step further, the band's singer, Tyler Joseph, said that this is going to be the conclusive end to the storyline he's been developing over the past 10 years. So if you didn't understand the title of this video earlier, I hope you're starting to see the similarities between these two events. Just like Avengers Endgame, 21 Pilots fans have been dying to figure out what's going to happen at the end of this story. They've been theorizing online as to what they think could happen during the album, and the whole thing just makes me really happy. It's so awesome to see a community fully embrace an artist's vision, and not just for the music, for the world building and the storytelling and the characters. If you've seen my other videos, you know that I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, and when a creator or musician or filmmaker tries to make something that's larger than life, I'm immediately interested. So when I review this album, which I'm about to, I'm not going to do it by giving every single song a score out of 10 or ranking this album amongst the others in their discography. I'm gonna look through this entire album as an experience and go through how each song made me feel. I'll say what I liked and what I didn't like, but I think this album is an accomplishment in itself. It's a feat not often reached or even attempted in music, and I believe this album truly deserves your attention. So, I'll start with the first single that the band released in anticipation for this album, Overcompensate. This is the song that inspired me to do this video the way that I'm doing it, because when this song came out, it really reminded me of when I first saw the trailer for Avengers Endgame. Everyone was losing their minds. It's the reason that I think of this album more like a film rather than a typical album release. And to me, Overcompensate was the trailer for this imaginary film that I have in my head. It kicked the door in and said, this is the level of quality that you can expect from this album, and then it dropped the mic. It's so ferocious of a single, featuring classic 21 Pilots beat switches and rapping, but it all felt fresh and different for a new era. Fans of the band know just how lore-heavy this song is, and it really just made me want more. It made me look forward to the final battle that this album was bound to bring us. But then we had to wait for a few more weeks for the next single, which was called Next Semester. And to be honest, this one took me a few listens, but it's slowly becoming my favorite on the entire album. I think the fact that 21 Pilots went for something a little more raw here really appeals to my punk roots that I grew up on. I'm also a sucker for when bands include big switch-ups in their songs, and you get a lot of that here. The verses here sound very punk, while the chorus sounds a bit like glam rock, and the outro sounds like more of an acoustic cut. But my favorite thing about this song is that what you hear is not what you think it is. Of course, there's a ukulele during the soft section at the end of the song, but you never guess that the guitars that you hear through the verses and the chorus are also ukulele. The production here is insane, and they've added so much distortion and fuzz to the ukulele that it's disguised amongst the rest of the song. It's a huge accomplishment, and if you want to learn more about this process, you should really check out Paul Amini's video walkthrough on how they produced this song. The next one, though, is Backslide, and to me, this is not one of the strongest cuts on the album. It's fine, it's not offensive, but it's often one that I skip more often than I let play. I think the chorus has a great melody, and I love the gang vocals, but overall, I just think there's something missing production-wise on this one. I do really love the last 15 seconds of the song, though, because that staccato synth that they use is just pure bliss. Midwest Indigo, though, the next song, is almost always stuck in my head. I think Tyler and Josh intentionally made a song here that sounds like it's from their first album. The song is bright, the vocals are far away, almost as if to signify a time long past. And if we're thinking about this album like a film, I see this one as the sentimental flashback. It makes me think of a simpler time, and that's just always a great feeling. Moving on to the next song, though, Routines in the Night. I think this one is good enough to be the next single. I think it could make radio. I'm all in on this song. Tyler's flow sounds so great on the second verse, and I think the whole song just sounds so crisp. If the last song's a flashback, this is the one that snaps you back into reality. Things sound just a bit harder and more complex here, furthering the story toward an inevitable conflict. This is probably my most played track since the album came out, and I just can't wait to hear fans screaming the lyrics at the live shows. Moving on, the next song, Vignette, really reminds me of Mulberry Street from the previous album, Scaled and Icy. It doesn't sound much like it, but it has that Elton John type piano in the chorus that is just such an identifiable sound. However, where Mulberry Street is a very positive, major sounding song, Vignette is the complete opposite. This song just sounds like a struggle, and I picture it somewhere in the middle of a film where things are starting to turn south for the main character. He's crying for help to start the chorus, and that imagery comes through wonderfully. I really love the lyrics on this one, especially the flesh covered in bites line. In terms of sound, it's not my favorite on the album, but it is growing on me. The Craving, however, hit right away. I was listening to this album right when it dropped with my girlfriend, and we were talking and having a good time throughout, but as soon as The Craving came on, we were silent from start to finish. It's such a sweet and tender moment that I think is captured beautifully here. It's also unique because 2 versions of this song were released. The one that's on the album has more impact for me because it's more stripped back, whereas the one that was released as a single reads more like an Of Monsters and Men song. Moving on to Lavish, though, I'm more confused than anything about this one. It doesn't really sound like it makes sense sonically, and the layers here are built through these cushiony synths that are meant to make things sound luxurious and expensive, but the tone of this song goes so far outside of what else we receive on this album that I personally could have done without it. I love the experimentation and the willingness to try something different. It just didn't quite click for me in this instance. I'm sure tons of fans have this listed as their favorite song though, so no disrespect. It's just one that I personally don't come back to very often. The next song, though, Navigating, is full throttle and exactly the type of song I want from 21 Pilots. It has hints of the Bravery or the Killers in its intensity and its instrumentation, but it still feels quintessentially 21 Pilots. And when this song came on, there was such an obvious joy that spread across my face. This song ignites things back up after a few more lax moments in the album, and it truly feels like we're heading to the final battle of this imaginary film that I've built in my head. However, I do need to address the elephant in the room. I think this song is mostly perfect, but I just cannot get past the vocal delivery of the titular word navigating in all of the choruses. That spot in the song is just built for a 3-syllable word, and Tyler Joseph really thought he could cram a 4-syllable word in there and thought we wouldn't notice. Of course, it's likely intentional, and Tyler probably just liked the way that the vocal delivery sounded, but I just cannot get past it myself. I do mind it less and less every time I hear it, but I don't think I'll ever fully not wince just a little bit when I hear him sing that word. From here on, we get 4 more songs, and none of them can quite match the intensity of Navigating, but they're all good in their own right. If Navigating is the final battle, I see the next 4 songs as kind of wrapping up this story. It's like in Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, where there's like 4 moments you think that the movie's gonna end, but it just keeps going. That's kind of how I view these songs. I think Snap Back is the weakest of the bunch, unfortunately, and honestly, I think it's a strange choice to have this one following Navigating. Snap Back has a very bouncy and dreamy production, and I think this clashes a little too much with Tyler's low and gravelly vocals. There are a few moments that shine, though. The chorus sounds angelic the way that Tyler starts it with those reverbed out vocals. If the whole song had these type of vocals, I think it could have achieved a really awesome result. But the verses stand out just a bit too much for me to fully enjoy this song every time I listen. The next song, Oldies Station, is pretty great though. It's very straightforward and cute, and the accompanying music video is adorable. I love the background gang vocals that kick in toward the end of each verse, and this is the type of song that I have absolutely no qualms with. I think it's really going to be a fan favorite from this album. The second to last song, At the Risk of Feeling Dumb, does pick up the pace just a little bit. The melody swings up and down, and the drums are so in the pocket. It's very satisfying to listen to. And while I do think the song as a whole is very solid, it's not one that I return back to very often. I love the melody, the bridge goes pretty hard, but there's just something about it that just hasn't quite sunken in yet. Maybe this will change with time, but I think other songs like Routines in the Night and Navigating carry out similar ideas to this song, but they just execute them a little bit better. And that brings us to Paladin Strait, the closer to this experience or album or film or whatever you want to call it. It's a very somber song, strummed on a ukulele, and it sounds like you should be listening to it on a beach or a cliffside. It's a very pretty song, and the vocals are produced to perfection. In contrast to a song like Snap Back, where it feels like the vocals are butting heads with the production of the song, the two elements here mesh absolutely perfectly. And I was really hoping that this song was going to build towards some epic finish, but it remains pretty unwavering in intensity from the beginning to the end. And there's no reason for you to know this because you don't know my musical preferences at this point, but I really prefer when things are big and theatrical. I have a harder time with slower songs, and I really prefer when albums end with a bang versus when it feels like they just drift off into the sunset. So for me, I can appreciate Paladin Strait as the conclusion to this 10+ year long narrative, but in my heart of hearts, I was really hoping for something a little bit different. I know 21 Pilots typically do end their albums with slower songs, but I don't think Paladin Strait quite hits the same mark in comparison. Truce from Vessel really pulls at my heartstrings every single time I hear it, and Goner from Blurryface starts slow, but it builds to this great and epic conclusion that leaves a great taste in your mouth when you walk away from that album. When I listen to Paladin Strait, I don't think it has the same emotional pull as some of their other album closers, so for me, I walk away a bit unsatisfied. I really wish that I could say differently, and I hope that it grows on me over time, but at this point, the album's only been out for about 4 days, and that's my honest first impression. But regardless of how this album ends, the entire experience is absolutely worth your time. I have an immense amount of respect and admiration for 21 Pilots doing things differently. They challenged the standards of what a radio hit should be. They crafted a whole world within their music, and they delivered something truly special for the conclusion of this chapter of their career. I hope that whatever 21 Pilots brings us next has the same level of care and respect that the first leg of their careers had. And knowing what we know about Tyler and Josh, I don't see any world in which this is the end of their creativity. So what did you think about this album? I know opinions are generally pretty mixed out there, but I'd love to hear your experience with this album and what it means to you. As for me, I'd love if you also liked this video and subscribed. That would just mean a ton to me. So thanks for listening, and bye now.